met Elizabeth Caddy Stanton. Oh my goodness, how much we all admired her. In 1895, remember, she had that 80th birthday at the Metropolitan Opera House. Oh, everyone who was important turned out. She only lived 6 years after that and went to Woodlawn Cemetery to rest. Oh, what was so sad about her and so many others, those people that started the suffragette movement, none of them got the right to vote. They did not vote. The first one to get the vote was Carrie Chapman Catt and her friend Mary Hay. But speaking of going to rest in cemeteries, I hope some of you have been following what happened to Susan B. Anthony this week. In Rochester, New York, where she lived and was laid to rest, women by the thousands stood in line, took their I voted stickers, pasted them on her memorial. There were so many people that did this. They had to put plexiglass over it. They had to put other memorials with plexiglass because these people wanted to pay a tribute. Oh, that touched my heart. But she never, ever got to vote herself. Now I'm going to start off with what we call the finishers. It took 70 years for women fighting every day, thousands of women to get the right to vote. The first half were the starters. That's what you heard about last time. Now we're going to hear about the finishers. Each group was so important. Now, I gave you a list before, and you have another list, and it talks about how different the starters were from the finishers. Okay, on this list, you will see we were still white, we were still privileged, our families were professional. Religious wise, only one Quaker, myself, Alice Paul. That's who you're talking to today. Good old Alice. Well, also in the first group, remember they were from upstate New York and mostly lower New England. Oh my goodness, our women now from the South, from the Midwest, the tri-state area. That's where most of our people came from. Now, remember, we only had one woman that was not married in the last group, and that was Susan B. Anthony. And she said, I can't do the cause and marriage in a family. Well, now the women are married, widowed, divorced, lesbian, you name it. Now, we have also changed education-wise. Do you remember that Lucy Stone was the only woman who had a fight for an education and went to Oberlin? Well, speaking for myself, I had an undergraduate degree from Swarthmore. I went to Columbia, I got my master's. I had 2 law degrees, and I got my doctorate from the University of Pennsylvania. And this was typical. Now women were better able to get education, and all of us traveled. We could now travel. There were so many ways we were different, and there were some ways we were the same. Our biggest difference as finishers was we were more radical. We were younger, we were dynamic, we weren't going to take no, we had to forge ahead. So I want to tell you now about someone I admired greatly. I didn't get along with her, but I admired greatly, Carrie Chapman Catt. Now, this woman was sort of the transition woman between the starters and the finishers. She was born in Wisconsin, lived most of her life in Iowa, was a poor farm girl. She was very smart and said, I want to go to college. I want to go to Ames, Iowa, to the University of Iowa. They were taking so few women then, just one or two women, and her parents were farmers. They said, yeah, okay, great. How are you going to get there? We don't have any money. So therefore, she said, I will do it. She did laundry for people. She cleaned houses for people. She worked full time at the library. She couldn't get a scholarship. They didn't give scholarships to women. You were just lucky if you got into the college. She got in, graduated top of her class, was the only woman who started out of 3 that was able to graduate. Now, when she graduated, what did she do? She became a teacher at half pay. But she did not stay a teacher. 1 year, 2 years, gone, out of there. She became a principal. 1 or 2 years, out of there. Superintendent of schools. 1 or 2 years, out of there. Superintendent for the whole county. Oh, she was making a name for herself. And while she was in the school system, she married her first husband, who was Mr., we always hear her called Carrie Chapman Cat. And Chapman was her first husband and Cat was her second husband. Well, anyway, she married Mr. Chapman. He had a job that he really wanted to go to in San Francisco. She said, I haven't been anywhere. All I've ever been to is Wisconsin and Iowa. I am ready for California. She was also ready for a new job. So when she went to San Francisco, she got a job as a reporter because she was getting very involved in the women's movement through Susan B. Anthony. Oh, did she admire Susan? So she got a job and she reported on women's issues and many other things. But oh, something happened to her to really move her over into women's issues. Sexual harassment from her boss. What could she do? There were no laws, there were no regulations, there was no one to turn to. She couldn't go to her boss. That was the one who was harassing her. That's when she decided, we have to vote and do something about this. She had a choice. You either quit or you deal with it. Well, her husband had gotten typhoid fever and he was very ill, so she had to basically keep her job. Well, Susan B. Anthony was reading her articles and she said, this woman is amazing. She said, the Republican convention is coming up. We need a 10-minute speaker. We need someone young. I'm too old now. I think I'm going to ask Carrie to be our speaker at the convention. Well, Carrie was thrilled. 10 minutes to speak. Boy, could she get her message across. Now, whenever Carrie spoke, she wore sapphire. Sapphire blue was the color that she loved. Well, she got up and she delivered a speech. Remember last week, ain't I a woman? Well, this is the kind of speech. It sealed the deal. Well, her husband passed. She was going to go back to Iowa, decide what to do. And Susan B. Anthony said to her, wait a minute, she said, I don't want you going back to Iowa. I want you to go to Washington, D.C. I want you to take over NAS. Now, remember, this was the organization that Elizabeth Caddy Stanton and Susan B. Anthony started. The National American Woman Suffragette Association. Well, she was so honored, but she said, I've got a few stipulations. She said, first of all, I'm on many peace committees. I would still need to stay on the peace committees. Done. Also, you know, I'm for states giving women the right to vote. I keep going out west. and I'm getting states, and I want to continue to do this. It's working. Oh, she was known for getting the states involved. You know how they used to say, go west, young man, go west? Well, Carrie would say, go, yes, go west, young women, go west. You'll get a husband, you'll get a better paying job, and they may even throw in the vote for you. So the third stipulation, was that she was going to continue to fight the liquor people, because those were the ones that particularly did not want the women to get the vote, because then there would be prohibition. And they said, you can certainly fight them. So she came to Washington, and she was a force to be reckoned with. She did an amazing job bringing in more Western states. 1912, things really changed. 3 women came, 40 years younger than her, joined her association, and rocked her ship and everyone else's. So now I'm going to tell you my story. I'm Alice Paul. I was from New Jersey. I was a farm girl. Oh, I was not a farm girl like Carrie. My father was a gentleman farmer. We had hundreds of acres. People worked the land. My father was a businessman. He was in Congress. He was very, very accomplished and academic. Ben Franklin was in his line of relatives. People that started and came over on the Mayflower were part of his family. He was a Quaker. Women are equal. He treated me equally. He encouraged me as he would any son that he had. Now, my mother, what a suffragette she was. She was head of the committee. She never missed a meeting. She took me as a preschooler to the meetings. I loved it. I did not care about Cinderella or Goldilocks or Sleeping Beauty. My heroes were Lucretia and Lucy and Elizabeth and Susan. And when my mother didn't go to vote, I'd say, Mom, how come you're not going to vote? And she'd say, I can't, but maybe someday you will change that. Does that stick in your head? It certainly does. Well, I went to Quaker school and elementary these reports, and I always wrote about Joan of Arc or Abigail Adams or Florence Nightingale. And I remember my teacher saying to me, Alice, can't you write about anything other than strong women? And I said, no, not really. And I continued to do this. High school, graduated #1 of my class. And of course, I went to Swarthmore. My relatives on my mother's side founded Swarthmore. It was a Quaker school. It was one of the few schools that admitted women. Now, I don't know if this is important to say this. I don't think so. But a lot of people think if you never marry, you have to be a lesbian. So people figured I was a lesbian because I never married. I dated in high school. I dated in college. I was engaged in college. But like Susan B. Anthony, I said, it's the cause, the cause. I can't have a family, run a house, have a husband, and work on the cause. So that's why I didn't marry. Now, when I went to Swarthmore, I decided to major in biology. Why? Because I knew the least about biology. I knew about every other subject. I got to my junior year, and one of the professors said, Alice, what are you doing in biology? You love law and politics and history and women. I have a plan for you. I want you to go to Columbia and get a degree in social work. I said, maybe that's a good idea. So I did. And I worked in the worst tenement areas. I felt I was doing a good job, but I was helping 25, 30 families. That's all I could help at a time. That was my caseload. I said, we have to change laws. This is the only way we're going to change what's going on here. And I got very restless after a couple of years. And I'd been reading about the Pankers in London fighting for the vote. Now, remember, they were the suffragettes. Violence, throwing fire bombs and bricks and vandalizing anything to make a statement to draw people to hear their speech. Now, I was a Quaker. I couldn't do that, but I figured I could learn from them. But I didn't know how to contact them. But anyway, I went to London. I got on a bicycle the first week, and I couldn't believe what happened. I'm going through Trafalgar Square, and there is this woman on a soapbox spewing forth like I've never heard. She's talking about the factories and the conditions in the factory and how the women are treated and the sanitary situation and how unhealthy and the injuries and the pay. Oh, I was in awe. I went up afterwards. I shook her hand. I said, I am Alice Paul. And she said, I am Christabel Pankhurst. This is who I was looking for. For 2 years, I got an education like no other. Wasn't violent, never took part, but I learned about protest, petitions, proposal, fundraising, volunteers, marketing, parades. Oh, what an education I got. And an amazing thing happened. Who did I meet while I was there working for Christabel? Lucy Burns, an American, an Irish Catholic from Brooklyn. Oh, we bonded. You would not believe how close we became. We became the new Susan and the new Elizabeth. I was the little tiny, never smile, serious, organized, and right person. She was this big, tall, outspoken, energetic person with red hair and freckles, and she wasn't afraid of anything. She could take my words and just speak them in such a way that I thought I hadn't even written them. She was amazing. And she was a great trainer of suffragettes. She was a natural teacher. Well, we decided to come back to the United States, not exactly at the same time. I came back first. I got a place for us to stay. She came back later. We were roommates. And we went to see Carrie with our plan. But I have to tell you about another person before I tell you about the parade and the White House fence. We came back and we were meeting with Carrie, and another woman joined us. This was Elsie Hill. She was from Norwalk, Reading, Connecticut. Now, she was not over in London, but she was studying in Paris. Her father, oh my goodness, he owned so many businesses. He went to Yale. He was a hero in the Civil War. He was also a congressman. He believed in rights for women, although he wasn't a Quaker. Her mother was a strong suffragette. Also started in our area the DAR, the Daughters of the American Revolution. Now, Elsie had two sisters, And when Elsie and her sisters were in high school and college, they wrote their own suffragette plays. They didn't produce them for the neighborhood. They took them all up and down the Connecticut coastline, making a name for themselves in women's rights while still in high school. Well, where did she go to school? She went to school at Vassar. And what's interesting, Lucy also went, but Lucy went earlier than she did. Oh, and by the way, I think I forgot to tell you that Lucy also went to Yale, got a master's degree, worked in Germany, studied and got a degree in German. And when she was over in London, she was going to Oxford. So you see, we're talking international, we're talking big difference when it comes to education. But anyway, while Elsie was at Vassar, she did something very special. She started the enfranchisement clubs, getting women to vote, getting women behind women's rights. She became so proficient at organizing her club at Vassar, they asked her all over the United States to go and do the same thing. She was on demand. Now, she was also asked by Black colleges down south to come and organize franchisement clubs there. This is a sticky wicket. Do we bring the Black women in? It's going to be much easier to get the vote for white women. If we bring the Black women in, it's going to be harder. How are we going to deal with this? Most of our people believe, let's bring the Black women in and see what will happen. Elsie went down and she worked with them. Each of Elsie's sisters, when they graduated, got $1,000. That was a lot at that time. And they got to study abroad, learn a culture, learn a language before coming back. Elsie went to France. She came back, got a job teaching French in a high school in Washington, D.C. And the three of us roomed together. Oh, were we a radical group. Well, we go to Carrie and we say, we want to join your group. And Carrie says, we need young blood. This is wonderful. And we said, we have a plan. We have organized this parade right before Woodrow Wilson inaugural. We want him to know and everyone else to know that we have a presence and we are going to get the right to vote finally. And she said, well, no, there's three things you have to remember. I believe in nonviolence, nothing military, and being ladylike. Now, can you agree that those three things are all going to take place as part of your parade? And we said, read our proposal. There's nothing violent in here. And she said, okay, I will back you. I believe in you people. Well, it's a good thing she did. Well, anyway, we decided Elsie had a lot of talent. She got the petition. She got the policemen. She went to all these enfranchisement groups. She got the funding. She brought them back to march in the parade. There were like 8,000 marchers in the parade. There were like tens of thousands spectators in this parade. Nobody had ever seen anything like this parade. Elsie also got the speakers. She had Ida Wells, the Black poet, put her in the back. Ida did not stay there. She marched her way up front. She had Nellie Bly, a great reporter. Helen Keller was speaking at that time. She had a play group that after the parade, you could go to a concert, you could go to play, you could hear the speakers. Unfortunately, None of those were able to happen. Well, the parade started out Pennsylvania Avenue. We were like 8 across, sometimes 6 across. By the time the parade ended, the crowd was so great, it closed in, and we were basically single file. Leading the parade, oh, the most beautiful woman inside and out, Inez Mulholland. She was the sharpest, shrewdest lawyer. She was helping us so much. She was Lady Godiva with clothes on. We would have heard so much more about her, except she died shortly after the parade of pernicious anemia. Now, in back of Inez, there were 4 horse brigades, all in beautiful regalia. And then in back of them were band after band, all with women playing different musical instruments. And back of that, there were floats, 26 floats, showing the history of women. You can see the work that went into that parade. Teachers marched in their cap and gown. Some of the nurses marched in their uniforms, but most of us wore suffragette white. And we wore our sashes so proudly. The white was for integrity and for purity, and the gold was for courage and for bravery. And if you see the sashes for the people in England, they don't have the gold, they have the green instead. And then for the purple, you know, this was for trust and loyalty. Oh, we were so proud of our banners. And then the black women are in the back of the parade. And we said, what were we thinking? This was so wrong. Anyone who wanted to join our parade should have been there. We should never have put the black women at the back of the parade. Halfway through the parade, the hecklers started. They started with catcalls. They started throwing rocks and tomatoes and oranges and eggs. And then the lines kept getting smaller and smaller. And in front of the, it's so hard to talk about, the White House, all hell broke loose. We never, ever expected this. There weren't enough police. They broke down the ropes and the cables. They started attacking all of us. They ripped off our sashes. They threw away our hats. They kicked us. They pushed us to the ground. They punched us in the face. It was bedlam. All the police precincts were called. The ambulances from all the hospitals came out. 200 people were hauled off to either hospitals or the police precincts. There were so many. Nobody had the same story. They arrested, but no one was charged. But the names were taken in case there was ever a repeat like this. So there were no plays, there were no band concerts, there were no speeches. This was the end of the parade. The newspapers carried nothing but our story on the front page. The radio programs were all about us. As we thought about it, we did make our statement. There were people that saw how desperate, how we needed the vote, why we had to change. And they began to follow us and they began to believe in us. But now we had to go talk to Carrie. And we knew that Carrie was going to tell us nonviolence, no military, ladylike, what happened. And we knew at that point that we had to split. There was so much difference in philosophy, and we respected each other, and we agreed that we would come together when we had to. Carrie, as we said, was for total nonviolent. She was for, and she was good with, if every state gave women the right to vote. She also did not believe in the Equal Rights Amendment. She just wanted women to get the right to vote. They had different funding sources. They came from a totally different generation and background than the rest of us. So we left and we formulated the National Women's Party. And this worked for us for quite a while. Well, anyway, after this, the war came, and Carrie was in the peace movement, and her group stepped back from protesting and took on peace efforts. Now, I said, look, we're in Europe fighting for freedom. Women in the United States don't have freedom. We are staying here. And we did. And Lucy said we need to picket the White House. We need to protest, and we agreed. This was a really good idea, so we set up the Silent Centennials. We weren't all that silent, but that's what we like to call ourselves. And we wore our outfits. We had banners and posters and placards and petitions, and we chained ourselves to the fence of the White House. Why did we chain ourselves? Because it was harder to get rid of us, because if we were just standing there, they'd drag us away. This way, they had to get papers and actually arrest us, get us off the fence, take us to the police precinct, interview us, the whole thing. And what did they arrest us for? Oh, terrible violations, loitering, disturbing the peace, obstructing traffic. Can you imagine such horrible offenses? And to keep us quiet and intact, they would take a couple of us every so often and throw us into prison. I was in prison 6 or 7 times, 2 or 3 months at a time. Lucy, oh, she had a big mouth. She was in prison more than I was. And Elsie, oh my God, she protested in Denver and Boston and New York City. She was continually being thrown in prison. And oh my goodness, I can't believe what she did one day. She was in Washington, D.C., Lafayette Square, climbed over the fence, got on Lafayette's statue pedestal, stood up on the pedestal, and started giving her speech. Ladies and gentlemen, I am here standing on a pedestal. Men say women want to be put on a pedestal. Well, maybe some women. There's a lot of women that don't need a pedestal. Instead of that, give us the right to vote. Give us some equality. Well, off she went to pay her dues for that. Oh, I'm telling you, it was something. What happened when we were in prison? It's almost too hard to talk about. When we were thrown in prison, we were totally abused. We were beaten, we were raped. We ate porridge with worms in it. We slept on straw mats with rats running all over the place. Oh, the worst part was the hunger strikes and the force feeding. They would clamp these painful metal mechanisms over our mouth and our throat, and they would pour down raw eggs in water, and they would make us convulse and vomit. And if they saw that we looked like we were going to die, they would let us out. The other thing they did to us, if we chanted or sang or bothered them, they certainly couldn't hang us by the neck, but they put our hands over our head, chained them, and chained us high enough so that we were dangling from a prison wall. They were trying to break our spirit. We were not going to let them break our spirit. We were willing to sustain. There were a small group of us there for several years. Rain, snow, sleet, hail. We were out there fighting. Well, there was one funny moment, if you want to think it's funny. One day, Woodrow Wilson came by, and then the presidents didn't go in the back through a secret entrance. They just went right in the main gate. And he would say to us, you know, Alice, can I just go one day without having you here protesting? You know, no chain to the fence, no posters, banners, no speeches. Just let me get into the White House. It would say, well, give us the vote. Patience. Your time will come. Patience. It's almost been 8 years. How much more patience can we have? So he said, tomorrow, give me one day off. We thought about it. The next day he came, no placards, no soapboxes. We stood there and we smiled at him. He said, thank you. He went down the driveway. We turned around. We bent over. We flipped up our skirts. And on the bottom of our pantaloons, it said, vote for women. Well, of course, it made the newspaper. And he knew that we had the last laugh. Well, after that, the war was winding down and he had to give in because we still had to have the states that would pass. He saw what Kerry was doing, getting all of those states out west just about the right to vote. And the parade, people were still talking about it, and they couldn't believe how much we had suffered in front of the White House. But what really sold him and Congress was that during the war, there were 15 groups of women who were helping the war effort. There were nurses, there were ambulance drivers, there were cryptographers, there were translators, there were spies, there were the telephone operators, there were the clerk. There were endless women who were involved in helping. How can you say you can't have the right to vote? So anyway, it was agreed upon. It was now up to the states. It is 219, it's 1919, 1920. And we knew it was going to be hard to get the states. Some of the states would agree and then they'd rescind and back and forth and everything. And finally, we were down to we needed one state's vote. And that we hoped would be Tennessee. And we had our hopes based on Henry Burns. He was 24 years old, a brand new congressman. Well, we went to the vote. He had a red rose. Now, you know what a red rose means. He's an anti. He listened to all those men that he was working with. But the suffragettes are shrewd. We knew that his grandmother and mother were suffragettes. His mother was very ill. We sent a suffragette to his mother. And we said, you need to write, we will help you, a letter to your son. We are going to deliver it right before the vote. And you are going to bring a tear to his eye, and he is going to change his red rose to a yellow rose. It worked. It worked. And we finally had the right to vote. Well, what happened to the women after the right to vote? Many things happened. Carrie decided she would go to Europe. She had enough. She was going to rest. She goes to Europe. She doesn't rest. Oh my God, no. She starts an international group. She does all sorts of things over in Europe. She works with Blacks over there, and she formulates the League of Women Voters. She said women can vote now, but they don't know how. They don't know about laws. They don't know about politics, government. We have to train them. We also have to get women politicians. How do you get that? You have to train them. So she started the League of Women Voters. And we were so proud of her. She's always been one of the top 10 people, women in Iowa. And she was on Time magazine. And she had a stamp with Lucretia Mott, Elizabeth Caddy Stanton, and her. And she had 3 musicals written about her. I mean, who has 3 musicals written about them? I mean, she was so dedicated. We would not have gotten the 19th Amendment without her help and mine. I'm going to be honest, and all of the people that worked with us. Now, Lucy said, I'm out of here. I have never worked so hard in my whole life. I have had no fun. I've had no relationship. We got what we wanted. I am not going any further. I am an Irish Catholic girl. I am going to Ireland. I'm going to work with Catholic charities. I'm going to help the orphans. And she was gone. She had done her job. But then we got Alva Belmont. Love Alva Belmont. She was our Miss Moneybags. She was a rich Southern girl. She married Cornelius Vanderbilt's grandson, more money. He had an affair. She divorced him, more money. She married Belmont, more money. She had 6 mansions. She didn't know what to do with all her money. And then she found us. She gave us one of her mansions for headquarters in Washington, D.C. It's now a museum. And she gave us another mansion in New York City. And she worked with us tirelessly. She was such an amazing person. Well, that left basically Elsie and myself to run forward with the ERA. So Elsie and I, we hit the floor running, and we went to see Albert Levitt. Elsie ended up marrying him. He was a lawyer. He wrote laws about women's rights. I wasn't a lawyer at that time. We helped pen the ERA amendment, and we called it, he suggested, the Alice Paul Amendment, because that has always been my baby. Well, we took it to the legislature, and they knew our chances. Look how hard we had to fight 70 years to get the right to vote. This is equal rights across the board for everything that a man has, a woman has. They go, let's give them a shot at it. So basically they said, okay, you get your 36 states, and, you know, you're all set, you know, we'll do an amendment. But they told us right there, you know, it certainly isn't going to be easy. And we're going to give you until 1972. They're going to give us 50 years to do this. So some states ratified, they rescinded, they ratified, they rescinded. Then they gave us to 1982. We still didn't have it. We were always 3 or 4 states short. This was supposed to be our big year, 2020. Well, you know what this year was like, so we certainly weren't going to deal with women's rights at that particular time. Now, what was the biggest problem? One of our biggest problems were all the aunties. Now, I don't know if you watch Mrs. America, if you watch The Amazing Mrs. Maisel, or I don't watch it, I don't know. But anyway, on those videos, films, TV shows, there's a Phyllis Schlafly. Phyllis Schlafly is what did us in. She was a shrewd lawyer who wanted to make people think she was Susie Homemaker, which she wasn't. Oh my goodness, everything we said that the ERA was going to do, she killed. So she would talk in front of groups and she'd say, ladies, you want the ERA? Okay, you're going to get drafted. Okay, that means you're going to boot camp. You're going to learn to shoot a gun. They're going to put you on the front lines. You're going to die. Who's going to take care of your kids? She'd say, okay, ERA, ladies, there's going to be one bathroom. Only one bathroom. There's not going to be male and female. So you're going to go in there. You may have a stall. You may not. Is this what you want if you have the ERA? She went further. She would go like, benefits. You have your husband's benefits. They help you. Your husband dies, you have kind of benefits. ERA, benefits. Gone, gone, gone. She really was very, very difficult, and she influenced many people, and many people believe that even without Phyllis Schlafly. But basically what happened is we kept trying. And I decided I wanted to work with the United Nations. And that was not gender neutral. So I helped to make the preamble and parts of the United Nations Constitution gender equal. I worked with the League of Nations. And I spent a lot of time in Europe. You know, the birther law you hear about all the time? Well, I had a friend, Maud, went to Georgetown, married a Prussian, went to Prussia, had a baby, divorced, wanted to bring her baby back, couldn't. The child was Prussian. I went crazy. I worked on that law. I had it passed. So when you hear about Obama and Cruz and some of these others, it was Alice Paul that did this. Well, what happened next was I was getting older, I was sickly, and I came to live in Ridgefield, Connecticut with my sister. It was closer to different places. And my best friend, Elsie, she lives in the next town, less than a mile away. My sister dies. She leaves me a house with a pond and some cabins. I'm going to use the money for the ERA. Elsie says, no, you're not. We're going to start a leadership camp for girls. And that's what we did. We started a leadership camp. It was so successful. But then my health kept getting worse and worse. And they put me, oh my goodness, in a nursing home. It was almost like being in prison. I didn't have anything to do with anyone. I just wrote letters, made phone calls about the ERA. I get to be 90 years old. The administration comes to me and says, Elsie, we're giving you a 90th birthday party. And I go, ha, I don't want a 90th birthday party. I've never had a party in my life. They said, you have to have a birthday party. Okay, go to the high school, go to the college, get me girls that are interested in politics. I'll talk to them and give them cake. This is what happened. Also, on my 90th birthday, Betty Ford calls. She said, Alice, Gerald and I want to wish you a happy birthday. I said, that's so nice of you, Betty. Now get your husband. I have a new plan for ERA. Till the day I died, I was fighting for ERA. Just before I died, I got nominated and they accepted that I would get the National Medal of Freedom or Honor or whatever. You think I ever got it? They never voted any money. Remember Harriet Tubman and the $20 bill and a lot of these things they promised women? Well, no one in my family ever saw that medal. Lucy divorced her husband, unfortunately, because she was involved so heavily in passing the ERA. She did an amazing job. She wrote the Bill of Rights. She ran for Congress 3 times to get it through. She did every conference, convention. She was relentless. At the end of her career, she did something so amazing too that I never even thought of. She went to the book companies. She lobbied, she petitioned. She said, how are women supposed to learn about their heritage? Less than 17% of every textbook even mentions a woman. You have to refine your textbooks and put women's information in it. Then she went to the colleges and she said, oh my God, you've got courses in the Civil War, in Chinese history, and Afro-American history. When are women going to learn about their history? It's not in the textbooks. It's not at the colleges. Now, every college has courses thanks to Elsie. Oh my goodness. Just remember that all of these women I've been talking to you about, they all say, and it's so important, remember the cause, understand the cause, and fight for the cause. It's not going away. You've seen what's happening recently. We all have to stay in the fight. I started off and I talked to you about standing on the shoulders of the women that come before you. Okay, who is standing on my shoulder, on Elsie's, and Alva, and Carrie? Who's standing on our shoulders? So many amazing women. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Bella Abzug, Hillary Clinton, Gloria Steinem, Betty Friedan. I mean, endless women are standing on our shoulders. And if you watch Saturday night, what did they talk about? Standing on the shoulders of the women that come before you. They talked about Seneca Falls. They talked about the 19th Amendment. They talked about enfranchisement. And one of the new things we're hearing now, and I love it, it's called Ladies, Wear Your Shoes. There's glass all over. We are breaking through the glass ceiling and we have to keep it broken. And I hope you noticed that our wonderful Vice President-elect knew how to dress. She had on her suffragette white. She had on her satin pussy collar blouse after Margaret Thatcher. And she had her beautiful pearls for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We are a team. We are a sisterhood. We are in this all together. I'd like to stop now and see if you have any questions.
This